The first item on the agenda is gravel roads, and I believe that Mr. Lasher has a presentation to make for us.
Thank you, Mayor. So I wanted to cover a few items as you're talking about this tonight, and maybe bring some ideas for you and your discussions. So what our job is problem solving. That's a lot of what we have to do for citizens is solve the problems. And as part of that, it's defining the issue. What is the real issue? What are the problems that we're trying to solve? Of course, when we hear complaints or concerns or whatever, we hear a lot of stuff, but we've got to identify exactly what it is that the problem that we need to solve. We need to figure out what the solution is. Is it solving the problem? Is it treating the symptoms? Is it a long-term solution or a short-term solution? And then understand the cost. What's it going to cost to solve that problem and who pays? So we've got three areas that we're talking about that have gravel roads. We have Arthur Heights, which was platted in 1953, contains 24 lots. You can recognize where this is at, just north of 45th off the Woodlawn. The other area is Cozy Homes Edition, and that's right off of 37th Street behind Treetop, and that was platted in 1965 with 10 lots. And then we have Aurora Park, which is at the corner of Oliver, be the northeast corner of Oliver and 37th Street. That was platted in 52, and that has about 102 lots. So what we've heard, I went back and looked, and this topic has been on 4 separate workshops over the last 2 years. And so these are the problems that we heard from different individuals. One was drainage. We've got open ditches. You can see we've got flooding issues down there, poor drainage. Some drainages can't be mowed. Some of them have filled in. We've got culverts that have filled in, etc. So we know drainage is a problem. The other thing we've heard is the gravel roads, where they're not being maintained correctly or not the right material. There's washboards, not enough crown, etc., etc. So we know that there's a problem with the gravel roads. And the last thing we heard is dust. So we know we've got a problem with dust. We've heard that numerous times as well. So what we did, this was just an informal survey we did, I think it was last year, to a number of the residents that we had at an open house, I believe. And we just asked, tell us what the problems are. So one of them was, what do you think the condition of the gravel roads? I think we had about 48 or 50 people respond to that. 20 of them said they were bad or very bad. 18 said that they were average or better. So, and you can see the variance there between the responses. A dust problem, 28 said they were bad or very bad. 10 said it was average or better than average. And then, of course, severity of drainage, we had 12 that said it was bad or very bad. 28 said it was average or better. So you can kind of see everybody has an issue somewhere. Some think that the gravel roads is worse. Some think the dust is worse, et cetera, et cetera. But we know those are the three problems because that's what we've heard. So what's a solution for the dust? Well, obviously, paving the road eliminates dust. That's a long-term solution. Or we could do dust treatments. This $25,000 a year, that's something that I put together if we were to buy the equipment needed to do that and the solution. But that's a year-by-year solution, takes time away from staff. Could we hire it done? Could probably hire it done as well. But again, that's the solutions is to permanently fix it or treat the dust. The gravel road issue, again, what would the solutions be? The permanent solution is to pave it. That's a long-term solution. We could look at adding more material. We could look at changing the material. We could look at the way we grade it. We could change the way we grade it. But that doesn't solve the dust. So we'd still have to look at solving the dust. It's a year-by-year solution. It's not a long-term solution. We could do some millings. I know that's been discussed. There's a cost involved in that. It's not a permanent solution because we know that millings break down over time, just like gravel does. Maybe some dust. A lot of times it doesn't create a lot of dust, but sometimes there's some dust depending on the millings that you use and how you use it. Not a long-term solution. And then we didn't even address the road base. So as you all know, in all the new roads that we put in, the base of the road is extremely important, because if that base is not done properly, then the road bed itself will fall apart, get potholes and things like that. So we didn't even address the road base. So then drainage, again, what are our solutions of drainage? Paving the road, as Kenley and Garver did with their review during their drainage report, that the 3.5 million addressed the drainage and the road improvements. So that solved that problem. It addresses the drainage, long-term solution. We could only fix the drainage, and that was about $546,000 for all the areas. But again, that doesn't solve the gravel streets. That doesn't solve the dust problem. It does improve the condition of the streets, because then we don't have water running over the streets and causing damage to the streets. It does improve the ditches and the drainage. And it is a long-term solution that addresses the drainage issue. So what's the action and what's the best solution? So obviously, I think everybody would agree here at home. I think if we didn't think about money, the best solution is to pave it. I mean, that solves all of our issues. The dust solves, the drainage is solved because that was part of it. The gravel issue is eliminated, and it's a long-term solution. I think everybody would agree. The issue that I think we're really dealing with now is who pays for that. So again, we know that it's a $3.5 million project, solves all of our problems for all the areas. So one way you could do it, which is what we do in all other subdivisions, is you special assess the properties. I'm guesstimating about $1,300 per lot for 20 years. That's based on that 3.5 million and the number of lots that are in each subdivision. City at large could pay for it, but then that adds about $180,000 a year in debt service for the city over 20 years. You're spending $500,000 to $800,000 a year now on road improvements. So you would have to subtract that amount from your current road improvement projects. You could do a shared where the city at large pays some, the residents pay a portion. Just a note, in case there was a thought that, well, what if we took all the tax money from those areas and put it towards the debt service? So that brings in about $70,000. So the city at large is still going to have to make about $110,000 of that. And that would be if we took all of Bel Aire taxes to pay for this project from just those areas. So then we look at, well, what's our alternate solutions? There obviously are alternate solutions. We could do nothing. Doesn't solve the drainage. Dust is still an issue. Street condition stays relatively the same. And then we could just wait to see if residents wanted to petition to pave the road. And that would solve the issue. We could fix the drainage. We know that would solve some of the issues. But that's around $546,000. Who's going to pay for that? It does fix the ditches, stops the street damage due to overflow. It is a long-term solution. But nothing changes with the gravel and nothing changes with the dust. Or road materials, we could use millings. We could add gravel. We could change the types of gravel we're using. We could change the methods of how we're grading. But again, how much do we want to invest in that, and who's going to pay for it? That's not a long-term solution. The dust continues. We still have that as an issue. So really the answer that I think staff and the citizens are looking to you for tonight is, what's the real problem? Do you agree that it's drainage? Do you agree that it's dust? Do you agree that it's gravel maintenance? Or do you agree that it's all three of those? And then what do you think the solution is? Should it be a permanent thing? or should we just work on something annually? Do we want to solve only one problem, or are we going to try to fix all the problems? And cost. How much is it going to cost, and who's going to pay for it? So that's where I see that we're at tonight. Like I said, we've had 4 different workshops. This is number 5 that we've talked about it. If you like, we can continue talking about it. We can continue looking at different types of material. We can talk about different types of dust control, whatever. But I think that I know staff is feeling frustrated. I know the residents are feeling frustrated. That I think it's time that we make a decision, or council makes a decision, give us a direction, and then we know exactly how you want us to proceed. So I'm here to answer questions. Ted, who's our finance director, is here to answer questions financially, and Ken Lee is here, who did the drainage study and can answer all your technical questions.
Ty, I have a question. I really appreciate your summary. I think you've got it quite right. I know my wife was telling me the other day on her road, her neighbors had to pay to have the road treated before their daughter's graduation for dust, right? So that way, if it was a dusty day, they wouldn't come. So the dust, and she lived out in country in Kansas. So without it being paved, I don't think the dust thing ever goes away. And I totally agree. That's super bad for you. Breathing in particulates is bad, whether it's cigarette smoke or sucking on a tailpipe or breathing in dust from a road, all that stuff's bad for you. So I can understand that. I am a little bit concerned if we would add, so I'm not suggesting we do pave it necessarily. I'm asking a question here. What if we had someone maybe on a fixed income that actually couldn't pay that much, if that's the direction we did go? Do we have the tools to be able to evaluate whether someone is on a fixed income and yada yada yada, and maybe we could help them out? Maybe they've lived in their house 30 years and they're long retired and that actually would put them out of the house. Would we even have the ability to think through that and make sure we're not putting anyone on the street, especially I'm thinking of someone retired or disabled or just some kind of situation like that?
So yeah, the council has the ability to do that. And council has done it in the past for various reasons. Basically create a grant program where someone could apply for something. In this case, we're talking about, assistance for paving because of whatever cost. So we would have to determine how you would qualify for that and what it would be valued at.
So I don't have a plan, but
yeah,
a plan like that could be made if deemed necessary. I know we're not making any final decisions today, but that would be in the toolbox, is I guess what I'm asking.
Yeah, we've done something similar on property taxes.
Mr. Mayor. Ty, can you remind me the $3.5 million estimate for the paving? What type of paving was that? Was that for paving to like county road standards, or was that concrete streets with curbs and gutters?
So Ken can answer that specifically. I do know that it was not curb and guttering. It was repairing all the drainage and all the ditches and completing a road base and some type of hard surface. So Ken, do you want to?
Yeah, and so there was a couple different items looked at on that, and the $3.5 million wouldn't be enough to convert it all to curb and gutter streets. There might be sections that might be curb and gutter, but some of the sections where you have larger drainage ways like Aurora Park, the water coming out of the lake, trying to put pipes in would be, I think that section alone was going to be nearly $3 million for that one because of the pipes. That would not even do the other 2 projects at all. So you would be talking, and I think her pricing was actually asphalt, or the pricing we looked at was asphalt on that, not concrete. It would have been asphalt surfacing.
So we have spreadsheet here, and there's 2 scenarios on it. Aurora Park, sure, very option cost. Aurora Park, that option, bigger option cost. First one is 3.7 million.
Okay, so it was actually a little higher than I remembered. It was the $3.7 million to have the pipe installed to do curb and gutter. And that would be just for Aurora Park on that one. So,
This page is 25 to Aurora Park,
yeah.
and it shows a 2.36 million for just a map. There'll be an asphalt map that's for the street. That's 20.
Yeah, the mat would have been just 26-foot wide mat pavement on those streets. That's correct. I think on the mat pavement, Ann had me do 7-inch. Ann had me do 7-inch on that. I believe is what we were looking at.
Sorry, I didn't have my mic on, but
Yeah, and
just reminded.
I wasn't close to my mic either. So, but typically Ann's been, when we're doing asphalt, she'd want a little bit thicker asphalt pavement, so probably 6 to 7 inch rather than 5-inch. We often do 5-inch in other parts of the community, but wanting to get a little bit more durability, she'd probably go more like 7.
What would you do about subsurface? What's included in this cost for subsurface?
We were recommending crushed rock base, which is the GeoGrid reinforced crushed rock base.
All right. And this does not include the work on the drainage. That's the other $546,000 on top of this.
I need to look. We actually had $250,000 in there for ditch grading as part of the work, and culvert. We had some culvert work that was going in that was included in the cost. So some of that $546,000 is rolled into this other price.
Okay.
So you're saying the 3.5 million, we're doing super roughly round numbers. I realize that wouldn't be quite right. Kind of like that 500 that's for drainage is built into that 3.5. That's what you're saying.
Yes, that is correct.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
So Ty had kind of asked us, what is the real problem? Trying to drill in on what do we think the problem is. And I've recently spent some time walking around in that area, and I talked to a bunch of residents. And I think the number one concern that I hear is consistent with the survey, and it's on the dust. All three are concerns. There's drainage issues, there's maintenance issues, and there's dust issues. And the consensus that I hear is that it's always been dusty to be on the gravel road, but something recently has made it a lot worse. Our change in aggregate, the weather, the maintenance, something has changed, and it's now noticeably worse. And that's consistent feedback that I've heard from almost everyone that I've talked to. And I think that is the biggest issue that I'm hearing right now, and the most important one to address. So what I don't know is, do we have a way to pinpoint what is making it worse, or why it's worse now than it's ever been? And is there something easy or cheap to do to kind of put it back to where it was from a dust perspective, and kind of see how that plays? Or do we need to go all the way to the permanent solution that's going to fix all the problems and kind of get everything done all at once right now? So hey, what are your thoughts, or what have we done to kind of identify what has maybe changed that would be causing the dust to be a lot worse than it was maybe 5 years ago?
So just from what I've heard in visiting with Ann and Public Works is, so we hear issues about the road condition, the washboards, that the drainage has eaten some of the road away. So what can we do to try to fix that? And so that's what they were using as material to try to fix that. But it sounds like in trying to fix that, then it created more dust. So that's the struggle is, okay, so then, how can we, now we've got two issues, the road condition and the dust. So how do we solve both? And that's the struggle. And that's what I understand is that we were using some different material to try to fix the fact that it was washboardy, that it was being eaten out, and that created more dust. So the question, again, if we're looking at solutions, we could go back to a different type of aggregate that may reduce the amount of dust. But then do we go back to the washboards? I don't know. That's something that we would just have to try. Obviously, there's a cost in that. Putting down gravel is a cost. But that's what I understand. From what I'm hearing, is what caused the extra dust.
Do you have any idea on like what type of cost it would be to go back to a different type of aggregate? Is that like a $10,000 item, $100,000 item?
I don't, other than just looking last year. It was either last year. Was it last year or this year that we spent about 30,000 putting some new material down? And again, that was to try to address the washboard, the road condition itself. If we had to put something other type of material down, I don't know if it's going to be 10 or 30 or whatever, but I would guess a minimum of 10. That's typically what we add to it just on a normal maintenance basis. So if we're going to try to replace it or build it up with something, just a guesstimate.
So if we were going to try that, we could do it in a way that we would just stop putting down the stuff that we're currently using now, start putting down a different type. Maybe it wouldn't actually be more expensive. We wouldn't necessarily have to go, replace it all at once, dig up the road and put down something different. We could just start adding something new to it and see if over the next 6, 9, 12 months, if that markedly improves the dust situation there.
Yep.
So I understand the material we're using today is about twice as the price of what we were using before for the prior material. Is that correct?
I don't know. I don't remember hearing that.
I thought I read a report like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, by
just
doing that, we'll reduce the dust.
Yeah.
You're still going to have dust, though. We can't do away with the dust unless you also wanted to combine it with some dust treatment.
I was just going to interject. One thing, like using sand or that type of thing is going to have a lot less dust, but the sand by its very nature tends to washboard more easily. And so that's the one balance is trying to find a product that does, reduce your dust without being more prone to washboarding.
The way that I kind of see it, I think dust is the biggest concern. Washboarding isn't ideal, but it may have the effect of slowing down traffic, which also reduces the dust further, which maybe isn't the worst thing. If I lived there and I had to pick it to be in one way or the other, I would pick a little bit of washboarding and less dust. But that's just, I think, how I would see it.
Another way that it could be done that some people would hate, and whichever one you pick, someone's going to hate. You could just use like white rock on the whole thing. It won't get dusty. It won't washboard, but you better not drive very fast on it because it's horrible to drive on. So like in gravel roads where I'm from, people that build these really, really nice homes out in the country and they have roads that go through them and they're privately done. They just put that white rock on them. So yeah, they're great. They last or whatever, but yeah, you drive slowly. They're not dusty. So they're, $2 million homes don't get dusty and whatnot, but you have to drive incredibly, incredibly slow on them or you're going to really, bang up your car. I mean, that's another way to do it. I certainly feel like whatever we do, we're going to make people mad. So that's a bummer.
Yeah. One other side I'll mention is the discussion of what the problems are. The survey revealed something that our survey crews experienced out in the field, which is there is a distinct separation of opinion on the drainage. We had a lot of people who told us, you need to do something. We had other people saying, what are you doing in my yard? Get out of my yard. I don't want you to touch my yard. So that probably just for the conversation, I know that was one of the more divisive ones. And the survey clearly showed that where there was a wide range, everybody was at one end of the spectrum or the other on that part of that question. So I just wanted to mention that while we're talking.
Yeah. So just because we've had so much discussion about this, just as a protocol, members of the community, if a council member would like to ask you a specific question, we will allow that. But I'm only going to give you the 5 minutes that we normally do in workshops to come and talk. But if somebody has a question for members of the community, please feel free to ask those questions. Okay. Just so we can move the discussion along.
I think we're getting to I think Ty's, maybe I'm reading him wrong, but I think he's frustrated that we'd never decide anything. We've 5 workshops. We've talked about it for half an hour or whatever we've done so far. None of us have the guts to say what we should do. And the reason none of us have the guts to say what we should do is because we know we're going to make a whole bunch of people mad, no matter what we do. And so I will be the one that makes everybody mad, since we are somewhat gutless. So this is what I am seeing is the best idea. This is going to be a problem for Bel Aire forever until those roads are paved. It's going to be every council member in the future from now in eternity, long after I'm not doing this, are going to fight the gravel road battle for whatever. And it's going to be for different reasons. It could be for dust or washboards or whatever. We'll get the new guy doing the grading and he'll do a terrible job and so on and so forth. And it'll be a problem all over again. And maybe for a few years, we'll get a really good person to do it and they'll do fine. And the people there will be happy, but it'll always be an ongoing thing. So I think until the roads are paved, this is just going to be an absolute problem. And I think some council has to have the guts to go ahead and say that we should pave it. And I think that's what we should do. I think that because we have failed to do some of the maintenance on the drainage, that of that 3.5, the city does need to pay a little bit of that because we did not maintain that drainage the way that we should. So I'm not sure the whole 3.5 needs to be done in special assessments, but I do think that most of it does, because that's what the rest of us did for our houses. We paid special assessments. I also think it would be horrible to put someone out of their home, especially someone that doesn't have a choice, that would have to be forced to leave. That person I have a lot of empathy for, and we should consider how to do that. But I think if we pave those roads, for other than people that are maybe retired and never going to sell their house or something like that, the value of their homes will go up quite a bit, because they're going to have them live on a road that's not paved. I mean, we heard from one citizen talking about how someone had to move out because the gravel roads are bad. Yeah, I would never move to a gravel road. I never would. I mean, why would I deal with that? I'd live in a smaller house. Like, I don't want to live on a gravel road. So the value of your house is going to significantly go up. So I think whatever the council we end up deciding to do, I think we're all going to get yelled at by somebody. And we've been talking about this forever. And that is the best solution I can think of right now. I'm open to be convinced otherwise, but I know there will be citizens that'll be mad, but I know whatever I say, I'll have citizens be mad. And it's just how I feel a bit stuck at the moment.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Welch.
I believe that we should go and get a bid for the Aurora Park map pavement option and find out what it's really going to cost. And because we've got a drainage issue there. And on the Hillcrest, we should get a bid for gutter option. And Cozy Drive, I don't know if gutter is feasible or not. I'm not sure is that got good enough drainage we could put gutter in there?
For the most part, it's pretty good. The only area that I'd be concerned about as far as curb and gutter goes is at the very east end at the cul-de-sac. There's a pretty decent drainage way that goes under the roadway there. You might have to leave that as a matte pavement in that area just because of the drainage that comes from off-site to the north. But you could do the rest of it pretty easily with curb and gutter on that one, outside of that northeast end where the cul-de-sac is at.
All right. Well, where it's feasible, I think we should get bids for curb and gutter. Even if that's half of Aurora Park, we should do that because it will solve our ditch problems. I think also we're going to spend about $500,000 on the drainage only. So I would suggest the city set that money aside. We help out anybody that's low income that can't afford to pay the specials if we do this. And then if there's still money, we use that to pay down part of the debt. That the city should step up and pay $500,000 some way towards this project. And I'd like to get bids out and get started. And if they come in just extremely high and everybody screams, then we get them to sign something that says, I'm not going to scream anymore and I'm not going to tell you about the dust because I don't want to pay and I understand. Okay. But right now we don't have real money. And until we do that, we're just fishing around and we're just going to go around circles and circles.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
paving it is clearly the best long-term decision, right? It's best for the city at large to not have to be in the business of maintaining gravel roads. You know, today we have to have staff that's trained how to do it. We have to have special equipment that is used to maintain them. And it's just a perpetual maintenance issue that's different from the typical maintenance we do throughout the rest of the city. And so there's that. And then there's all the things that Ty highlighted around, no matter what we do, a gravel road is still going to have dust. It's still going to have some washboarding, and it's still going to create issues for drainage maintenance because the road is naturally going to wash into the ditches. I do think the drainage is the city at large's responsibility. The way that I see this is residents pay to have things put in initially, and then the city maintains it going forward. The residents that live here, they installed ditches and drainage, and the city failed to maintain it going forward. And the city at large needs to maintain that drainage just like we do everywhere else in the city. And so I don't think it would be reasonable to ask any of these three areas to really pay for the maintenance cost that it would take to get their drainage back to an acceptable condition. So yeah, if we're going to move forward with paving it, I don't actually think we should take and assess the full amount to the residents. I think we should take the full amount and subtract what we would have spent to get the drainage to an acceptable condition. And then it'd probably also be reasonable to subtract whatever value the $30,000 a year of maintenance that we would do on that gravel road would be, whatever debt service that would pay for. If that $30,000 a year translates to, I don't know exactly what that translates. I guess it's a sixth of the project. If the total debt service would be 180,000, I think that it would be reasonable to take that off the top as well, because that's money that the city won't have to spend maintaining those gravel roads. And, I think we could share it in that way. So if we're going to move forward with that, and I think it's a great idea to get some actual real numbers, because until we have those, as Councilmember Welch said, we can't really understand what the reality would be. I know that Ken has done a good job putting together estimates for us, but they're just estimates until we have somebody who actually is going to construct it come and take a look and give us a bid.
I guess the one question I'll ask from you as far as that goes is we've got a lot of preliminary surveying done for like looking at the ditches and such, but as far as really going to a full-blown road design and putting together plans for that, we don't have anything like that at this time. So when you're asking for prices, is it something you'd be more interested in having us put together some like bid documents where we'd have the rough quantities for the contractors to evaluate, to give you some budgeting type things, but we'd need to get full-blown plans to get a final price on, because that's the challenge on something like this is until you do the full-blown design, there may be some variables that we haven't uncovered in our initial study. So when you're talking about going out for bids, is that something where you'd want to maybe go to a couple contractors and get some advisory bids is that what you're kind of thinking right now?
So just to first understand what we have today so far, you did a study of drainage.
Yes.
And that was based upon the assumption of restoring the ditches to a quality that would provide the proper drainage for all these areas.
Yeah, and what I'm getting at is it's more restoring ditches. It wasn't about reestablishing road widths or making a road a specific width and those type of things that you might want to do if you're taking the time to pave it. Anybody's driven in Aurora Park, a couple of those roads get on the narrow side as you go along, and there'd be some additional costs to that our plan level wasn't going into that level when we were looking at it. So the question would be is how to proceed with it more as where it would be a design bid build where, you'd have somebody design it, bid it and build it. Or do you want to go more of a design build type thing where you give the contractor the parameters and put more of the onus upon them? I don't know what the best solution on that, but we could get some advisory costs, but there would be some more plans that would need to be prepared to get a full blown construction set to get a full blown bid on. So I just wanted to make sure that's clear.
To understand also the curb and guttering suggestion, there's no work done on that at all.
Yeah, there hasn't been any work done on that at all. And
that's a lot more guesswork than the MAT proposal because nobody's actually done a serious evaluation for that.
Yeah, you'd have some pipe evaluation and some earthwork evaluation. The actual, like the roadway, the curb and gutter quantities, the asphalt quantities or whatever, those quantities are pretty well defined, but there'd be some of the piping in that. There'd be, without having a more complete set of plans, there'd be some ambiguity in that respect until some more work had been done.
I want to get to a place where we have a number that we have like maybe a 85 to 90% confidence in that we're close.
Yeah.
We don't have to be exact, and we don't have to put it out for, a real bid, but I want to get a good dollar number. Right now, we're just kind of working with our own dollars, and until we put it out to a company that would actually do the work.
Yeah.
Did I hear you suggest that possibly some of the contractors might be interested in design build type of concept?
Yeah, and there's always risk reward with that type of thing. But I know like a couple of the street replacement projects, that's the route that we went was, or the city went with, was doing more of a design build where the contractor took responsibility. Like Batten Street in particular, the contractor went and shot the curb grades. I actually went and met with them while they were doing that, and we talked about what they were going to do to kind of vet their decisions and make sure they were making good choices. But so we've gone that route. The ditch streets is a little bit more complicated in that respect. I don't know that you get the best prices because there's more risk on the contractors end. That's one of the risks with design build is they typically get stuck with a not to exceed price for their work. So there's a little bit more risk in that. So a lot of times the design bid build is you get a better feel for what the cost is. And it's, of course, at the end of the day, it's all in what the market is.
I'd also like to make sure that we separate these projects by neighborhood. So the Hillcrest is by itself and not tied to anything in Aurora Park. So if we decide that we want to do Hillcrest, we just go do it.
That's the fairest way to do it is to assign it by neighborhood. I mean, that certainly is the most fair way.
And I don't know, I guess Cozy's big enough we wouldn't have to lump it with something else, or would we get a scale issue there maybe that would.
Well, and that's one of the challenges. You can, a lot of times it depends on how you wanted to do it. You can have each project be paid for independently, but be part of a larger group where they're all tied together, where the economies of scale don't punish you as badly. So it could be that you would do the Hillcrest and Cozy Drive as one package, but each group would pay for their own work independently. So you get some economies of scale in that respect. And that may be the best way to look at it, would be that like Aurora Park, if it's going to be ditches, would be one package. And then Hillcrest and Cozy, if you're thinking curb and gutter on those two, have that as a completely separate bid package for people to consider.
We'd have to separate it to be able to assess it properly.
Yeah. Well, and you can always do internally inside the project. You can have like a group A, group B items. So I've done that before on projects where you have different benefit districts that
Assign a
separate.
specific dollar amount to this piece of the project.
Yeah.
Would there be any advantage to putting all three of them together as a total package and say that we would consider all three of them at a better price and maybe consider them separately at higher prices or something that I don't know what something like that.
It's always better. The more work you can give somebody at one time, I think you're always going to benefit from economies of scale. The larger you go, I mean, it's just mixing and matching different types of projects. Sometimes you might have a contractor who specializes in the dirt work side, and so they may be more competitive on the Aurora Park part, but they may not be competitive on the other part. So sometimes you can find a difference in that respect, where you might have a contractor who's hungry. And typically, though, the more you lump together, the better your overall package price is, typically.
Okay.
But no guarantees in life, of course.
Okay, so
So I think one of the things that you want to decide tonight is if you're really wanting to decide, one of the things we could do is we could go out to contractors to get some pricing to see where, go to the contractors, get a better price, prepare a petition where the city decides what percentage they're willing to pay, take a petition and take it out to the folks and see if they're willing to sign it. That's always an option as opposed to just charging it in on the property owners without any kind of decision making. Typically petitions, you have to have and I don't know what City of Bel Aire's specific rules are on petitions. We'll have to rely maybe on Jackie on that part. But like if you get 60% of the property owners and 60% of the land area, or is it, I don't know if it's just a majority, 51%. So that's one thing you may want to consider on it, as opposed to just saying we're going to do this. Figure out what cost, get with a contractor, try and tie that cost down, and then take a petition out to the residents and say, hey, it's going to cost you this much. Who's willing to sign, and see who's willing to put their name on the line. That's another way to handle it. That obviously won't get it done as fast, but at the same time, that does put the onus back on the residents themselves to decide what do they really want to do.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I think it's really hard for anyone to even, kind of make informed comments to us as council members without real numbers, right? Folks that are watching, the folks that live in that neighborhood, they don't know, like if they say, yes, we want this road to be paved and we're willing to pay for it, they don't know if they're signing up for $5,000 a year or $500 a year. And that probably makes a really big difference in their opinion. And so that's why I really think the right next step is to, as Councilmember Welch said, get that 85-90% confidence interval on some numbers that we could put out there. Of course, we won't get everyone one way or another, as Councilmember Schroeder, mentioned earlier, but it'll at least give us the opportunity to hear some thoughts and to get feedback on it from different individuals. I'm sure we'll have some folks that are for it and some that are against it, but I'd like to have good information to put out so that we could get that feedback from the public.
I agree. Obviously, that 3.5 is 7, then that's a different discussion. If that 3.5 is 3, then that's a whole different discussion, right? So certainly we can't really decide anything, but I think it sounds like we have confidence here that we need to get that number of the paving stuff. I mean, that solves all of our problems, in my opinion, even though it's going to stink for people aren't going to like it. Some people won't anyway. So I hope that's what we do, figure out those. And then once we have those numbers, we'll make the next decision.
So I've been making some notes here, and I have basically 7 bullet points that is, I understand, is the direction. And so let me list those out. And if the council members have discussion about one or the other of them, we can do that. The first is to do curb and gutter where feasible and mat otherwise. The second is city pays $550,000 of the cost for drainage because that's deferred. We've been deferring maintenance on that for some time. The third is propose a program for low income people. The fourth is we look at possibly $30,000 city share in annual costs that we currently pay in maintenance that we would defer to to a cost that would maybe to the citizens. The fifth is a design bid build concept. Is that a correct thing to say?
Yeah, I mean, that's always an option to consider for it as far as a way to do it, as opposed to design build. You have design bid build, yeah.
The sixth is separate projects, but look at a combined proposal as well. And that, you could say it in such a fashion that the city reserves the option to let these as separate projects or as a combined project, so that we know the numbers are both ways. And then the last is put petition out to the property owners once we have some real numbers that we can say this is what the cost is going to be. Is that capture the all the issues that council members have raised?
I would say on the 30,000 a year of maintenance, like I agree with the spirit of that. At some point we will have to do maintenance on those, so that can't last for 25 years or, the life of the thing. So I assume Councilman Smith thought of that. So I agree with a certain amount of time being that taken into account. But at the time at which we would have to start spending money to take care of those paved roads, that $30,000, that can't be for 20 years. That would be a huge number.
And that's a fair comment. Ann would have to speak to it, but I know that the city has tried to start implementing a program for doing the slurry seals or chip seals on the roads periodically, like is it 5 to 7 years? I don't remember the exact interval. And there is a cost to doing that too. So
yeah.
It's never free. It's just a different kind of cost, but you'd want to evaluate that balance of that 30,000 a year versus that intermittent cost. That's definitely a worthwhile consideration.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
What I was thinking about there is, is exactly what you said, Dr. Schroeder. Today we're spending $30,000 a year just on maintenance. There will be ideally the new road that we'll put in will last a really, really long time. Of course, we won't want to spend $30,000 a year forever on that road, but as it stands, we're going to spend a minimum of $30,000 a year on the gravel roads. And then there'll be, every 15 or 20 years, we're going to have to go spend $500,000 doing these ditch projects again, because we know that the way that we're solving ditches right now isn't permanent. And so there's a right way, I think, to account for how the city could contribute to offset that. Since the residents that live there did have a road put in, there should be some credit applied for the fact that a road already exists. I think
I completely agree.
Calculating that right number, our staff is probably more equipped to do that than
That's
I
right.
am. But
Yep.
that's the spirit of what I was trying to get across.
Okay.
Is there a more permanent solution to the ditches? Can they be paved or a good strong rock, something that will require a minimum amount of maintenance over the next 20 years or so?
No,
Okay.
I mean,
Accept
not really. You could put ditch liners in there and those type of things, but the cost of that starts to add up so quickly that it's really not cost effective. As far as a cost effective solution that's going to make it go away, open ditches are just something that require maintenance. So by the time you line them, that stuff, any of the liners I've ever used, they tend to add up really quickly in cost.
But we should minimize that ditch repair because the road would be a hard surface, so it wouldn't be washing off into the ditch anymore.
It'll help. By one of the problems you have right now is if you watch it rain out there, you get this nice milky white runoff that comes off the road, and that's depositing sediment and silt into the ditches. That's increasing the problem. So it'll be better with a paved road. It won't go away completely, but it'll be better. But ditches over time, just thatch build up from the grass over time. It naturally builds up regardless. And so you can't get rid of it completely, no matter what you do. But it would be better with the paved road.
Any more discussion? Do we feel that the staff has adequate direction here?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith?
I did see a couple of hands in the audience. I don't know if we could allow for maybe 2 minutes
Yeah.
per person of questions or
Ask-
comments.
Ask questions or comments.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Gary Bro. I live at 4046 North Harding. You guys have all had great points. You're never going to make anybody happy up here, at least more than 50%. But I think you're right to bite the bullet and get the numbers and figure it out, because it's never going to go away. It's kind of like the senior clubs in this town. That problem never went away, I don't think. Mr. Smith, I think there's a tie between just the road and the drainage, because what happens is the rain washes everything off the road and the sand builds up in the ditches and fills the culverts up. And then the drainage gets worse and it knocks the base of the road out of the way. So I think the neglect over the years from not doing the ditches has trashed the base of the road as well too. So I think if you consider putting that in there, I think getting that base back should be part of the cost of the city too, because I think it's been eroded because of the neglect in the area. If you go down this road about trying to assess people's taxes on this thing, I can see this going another year or two down the road. I would hope we don't put off just doing something with the ditches while we figure all that out, because I think that's going to be a very difficult route. We've always said that we don't think anybody's going to help pay for things around there, I don't think, or enough anyway. That's my feel. So I hope we keep something else going for Plan B for the ditches and the dust and getting things back up to par to where they were before. Appreciate all your work, and your thoughts tonight were great. Thank you.
I hope we could get something decided in the next 2 or 3 months. And any money spent on ditches now would be a waste if we do.
And a couple months is okay, but 2 years, I would hope.
I don't want it to be here in 2 years. I want it to go away. I want you all to be happy whether it even costs you some money or not, but
Well, my name's Chad Critton, and I live at 4130 Harding. I'm right at the fork of Batten and Harding, so I get the dust from both sides. So it's pretty miserable. I got 5-year-old twins and an 8-year-old, so going outside anymore is just not fun. Whatever we decide to do in this end of it, I mean, we do need a temporary solution, and I do like the idea of maybe if we could change materials for the time being, because that, well, other decisions and things are going out to bid, potentially the residents can say, wow, this rock is so much better. Maybe that's going to solve some of the problem. At least some of the residents could try that and say, this works good for us or it doesn't. I know my culvert, and I've complained to the city several times that our culvert's completely full of sand. And it has been, and it's never been cleaned out. So I'm like, well, I mean, there's part of the problem that I think could easily be fixed on some of those things there. And one of the last things that we talk about is if we can't control the dust, can we slow down the speed limit on our roads? It's 30 miles per hour right now. 30 sounds slow until you live on those streets. And it is just terrible. I mean, I haven't opened my window in 4.5 years in that house. There's no point to, because it's so dusty with them closed. But if we made it 20 miles per hour and then we enforced it, I mean, enforced the law out there and really get it, because I mean, we have some very inconsiderate neighbors, knowing we have children all over that neighborhood that do 40 plus down that road. And at those speeds, it's 5 minutes until that settles where you can't even see the streets again. So if we had some kind of temporary thing that doesn't really cost the city much, potentially other than a couple speed limit signs maybe on those streets, I think that would make me feel better, just for the safety of my own kids, but that we could get the kids back out in the yard.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I know last time we had a workshop on this, someone recommended to go visit the Springdale Lake area at 143rd and Kellogg. So I did that. And I learned some interesting things out there. Speed limit there is 10 miles an hour. The roads are 1 lane, not 2 lane. And they do have a larger rock there. But I think the biggest difference was 10 miles an hour speed limit, whereas you're right, 30 miles an hour. And that same day I went and drove through Aurora Park, and I was only going 20. I started up a little dust. Somebody was roaring up from behind me, and they must have been hitting 40 because they are really throwing the dust out. And so the speed does make a big difference. So I agree with that concept. I know our police would have some chagrins about having to enforce that, because that means patrols over there much more frequently than they're able to do right now. But we can have that discussion as well. Thank you.
can we put that speed limit change on the next council meeting? Or is that something that even has to be approved by council?
Most speed limit changes have to be done through the chief and the city engineer through an engineering study. I'm not certain what the rule is for dirt roads, so I wouldn't put it directly on the next council agenda, but possibly the next workshop agenda would be the best place to
I
put
would
it.
like to ask that be looked into.
Yeah, last time we talked about this, I think may have even been Ken that said that we didn't really have to do much of an engineering study on that road, but we did, if we have to get chief involved.
Well,
That's almost a month away. I hope we could.
I do think the comment about having the police involved in the discussion is an appropriate thing you'd want to do. The thing that came up when the study came up, the problem with doing speed limit studies is if you throw out counters, if you've got, it's the 85th percentile speed. So if you have a bunch of lunatics driving 40 miles an hour, your 85th percentile speed may be 35 miles an hour. So sometimes studies can actually give you the results that you don't want. And so a lot of times speed limits are set based on what a governing body wants to do. And you have a little bit more what would you call it, discretion when you're dealing with roads like this, where it's a dust control issue as opposed to a speed issue. But a speed study itself, if you were to throw down sensors, I don't think you'd get results that would support slowing the speed down. So if it's really dust control and those kind of things, I don't think a speed study is going to be helpful in that respect. So that was my comment at the last meeting.
So to be clear, we would not be doing a speed safety study. We'd be doing, if we did any kind of study, it'd be a dust control study.
Yeah, it would be
We
more
already
along
know
the lines
result
of
of
probably
that.
getting yeah, it might be getting a geotechnical engineer to give some opinions on what speed limits would make a difference on the road. That might be in a more appropriate study as opposed to looking at it from what people are willing to drive on the road.
So yeah, we would have to have a speed study, but you could take in other factors. So you do need to do that sort of engineering study. So it's not arbitrary. But like Ken is saying, if the priorities are dust and other safety matters, those can come up. And as long as your decision is made on the whole, magnitude of the situation, you would be okay. It just can't be that you just want to change the speed limit in that area. So
Yeah,
it's definitely right for a
So
workshop.
would we have to approve money for a speed study then, or would we, how fast can we move that through is what I'm,
It probably can be pretty quick, but we would first want to have the workshop to talk about the right pieces to go into that. And so we could probably do it 30 days after that. It just depends on what information we pull in. So if we were able to get it on the January workshop, we could possibly have it done in March.
Mr. Mayor.
okay, well, I'm not liking that timeline because I was hoping we'd have road bids by then and we could,
Yes, Mr. Smith.
I think we sometimes do temporary speed limits for different reasons. Maybe I'd ask you to look at if we have an option to try a temporary speed limit
You could do a temporary one for safety.
and see how that improves the safety situation from a dust perspective while we consider the alternatives and more formal long-term studies.
And I was going to interject that the one thing about a slower speed, another factor that would come into it would be not only dust, but the washboarding conversation. Lower speeds, you don't have as much acceleration and deceleration of cars, so that would have an impact. But again, that'd be kind of maybe more of a geotechnical engineering discussion as part of that component, evaluating the speed. So
To throw that into that, we were given pictures, I believe at the last workshop, of a school bus where it was could not even be seen a half block down the road because of the dust. And that alone is a significant safety concern. I think we should keep that in mind.
So it sounds like we could do a temporary speed limit change because of safety issues pretty easily and quickly.
That's correct. You still would want to lean on the advice of your chief.
Sure.
So we would ask that we get that in motion, please.
Yeah, and just so that you know, those speeds and intersections, stop signs, that's all state statute that requires those. It's not us saying, well, we want to slow this project up. It's state statute that says if you're going to set the speed limit, you got to have a study. If you're going to put a stop sign, stop lights up, you got to have a study and explain why. So but we can get around that by like temporary things, something like that. But it's not us. Don't think it's us.
yeah, when I said I
It's
didn't like the
state
timeline,
statute.
it was not because I didn't want you to follow the rules. It's because I'm hoping that in 3 months, which is about the same timeline, we would know what the cost of the road would be. So, and I'd like to have a chance for the slower speed limit to work before we decide what to do with that.
Yeah, and if we think there's maybe a solid chance that we're going to do something different long term, maybe it's not worth spending the money on more studies and instead address this with a more temporary resolution.
Okay. All right. Have we exhausted this topic? Certainly. Dr. Bro.
I forgot to thank you because they did come out and made my ditch mowable. And so I always was thankful when people would come up and thank you for things too. So Ty and whoever. My ditch does look mobile. I don't know if it's going to take a spring rain or not, but we'll find out then. But it looks good right now. So thank you for that.
Okay. Next item we have, and we still need to do a land bank meeting as well. So the next item is the chamber funding policy, and I know that Ty has put a lot of work into this. So would you like to talk about this, Ty?
Sure. So in the past, we know we have a Bel Aire Chamber of Commerce, and with all organizations, they struggle. There's been discussion about, what can they do to improve membership, to improve their value, et cetera, et cetera. This council has discussed, could the chamber take over community events? And so the current president is Gary O'Neill, and I've had discussions with him about, the vision, the future of the chamber. And he has shared with me that they struggle because it's a volunteer organization. We all know how those struggle. And that they would really like to have a part-time director who could set aside time to go out and
He's wanting something back here.
Okay, excuse me. Your mic is off.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I knew he wanted something, but I couldn't tell what.
So the chamber is looking for additional funding, basically from the city, to assist with maintaining and actually growing the organization. They've determined if they could hire a part-time director who could go out and solicit businesses that could maybe do some fundraising, that could assist with community events, etc. And they are requesting $20,000 in funding from the city. If they don't get that, his feeling is that it will probably disband because they're all business people. They don't have the time to put towards, expanding the chamber, growing it, bringing in the speakers that they would like to have, et cetera. So I put together kind of an agreement that is in your packet that talks about if the city were to give them some funds, what would we expect in return? You can see in there that we talked about assisting with the community events, helping fundraise for those events, et cetera. And so that's what's on that's for your discussion tonight is, I think number one is, do you see a value in having a chamber? If you do, do you see an amount that's appropriate to assist in funding? And what would that be? And based on the information or the agreement that I put together, does that answer your concerns? I will tell you that that's not independent of just Bel Aire. Most cities have to support or do support their Chamber of Commerce's. It varies, the funding amount could be $5,000, could be $50,000, but it's not uncommon for cities to support their chamber.
Ty, do you have any number you could provide on the value that the chamber has provided since its existence?
So, and the bigger question there is, because I met with their board a couple times, is what is their purpose? Is it for the community or is it for the businesses? And so, my thought is, how do they support the community? How do they bring benefit to the community? They see it, the board members see it as, how do they support each other and the value that they bring to their members? So I think there's, your thought is, my thought is, what do they bring to the community? Their thought is, their mission is to bring value to their members. Now, there's very few of the members that are actually in Bel Aire, and that's why it's called the Bel Aire Area Chamber. If you looked at the number of businesses that we have in Bel Aire, including home businesses, I think we have around 60 or 70. So the membership that I've got, they've got about 25 to 30 members. So obviously they don't have all of the members or the businesses in Bel Aire. In fact, probably very few of them. Now they have in the past, they've supported events. So in the past, we've had like a gold membership of $1,500 donation, and the chamber would donate $1,500 towards that, be a gold sponsor. That's typically the community engagement support that we would get from them.
So one of the things I think it's kind of, well, it is important. Bel Aire could use a lot more help with bringing in retail. Active Chamber of Commerce can help with that. It wouldn't guarantee it, but it builds part of the synergy that you need to get that going. If we can get some of that, that's a pretty good tax base to have to help the city. It works both ways. Okay, so
I've been on Chamber of Commerce's, and I was never aware of a single business we ever were valuable in bringing in. If a business was going to come in, they needed stuff. They needed to know things. They went to the city, not the Chamber of Commerce. Now, maybe that's different in well-established, long-running chambers. I'm sure there are some chambers that have done incredible things for the cities. But we can't put words to anything that the chamber's been able to do. I'm not even sure it's their fault. We don't have a ton of businesses here. There's not a lot of options there. My understanding of part of what chambers do too is they provide a networking opportunity. Well, there's not that many businesses here to network with. We're so close to Park City, Wichita, so these other places. Well, if you're going to network, you don't want to be at the Bel Aire Chamber of Commerce. You want to be an event where all those things are available. So it seems like our chamber is having a really hard time finding a niche. I don't think this is their fault, or I think how they work is these businesses want to be a part of it. They want to volunteer for it, and they want to pay dues. And we're just not having that interest right now. And I would be open to supporting them. We have supported them in the past, but I think what's going to happen is we're just going to support them more and more and more. And then this will pay the person that goes around and tries to raise money for them to continue to exist. So raising money so you can exist doesn't, what value are we providing? And we can't put a number on it. Now, something like the Lions Club, I think they provide tons of value. They provide tons of community value. They're at events. They help volunteer. They provide things. It's fun. I enjoy seeing their purple shirts when I see them. Right, like I think that they're providing a bunch of value to the city. So I don't think chambers necessarily don't provide it, but I'm just not seeing it here. And since the $10,000 we were able to give them wasn't enough, I actually don't think this will be enough. If you really want to find a really good quality person that's going to do a really good job, this person's going to have to work completely independently with zero oversight at all. Those volunteers aren't going to make sure they're working ever. So you're going to have to hire someone that's going to be willing to show up and work 40 hours a week, even though nobody's going to actually see whether they're doing anything or not. And to get someone of that quality, I don't even think this is enough money. So that's how I'm seeing it right now. I hope I'm not making it sound like the chamber's bad, or I think Gary's wonderful. He's done wonderful things for the city as serving on here. And I think, he's at least one of the members of the Lions Club, which is fantastic. I'm just not sure the chamber currently is, I'm just not sure what more value we're providing. I'm afraid we're just going to keep pouring money into this to just have them continue to exist.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith?
has the chamber come up in any of your discussions as you've talked with businesses that were coming here to Bel Aire, or as we've made all the land sales that we've made? I'm just interested in, has that ever been a topic of conversation? Have you seen it be something that was interesting or attractive to people that were looking at Bel Aire? What I would hate to do is, decide to stop supporting the chamber, right, as we've sold a bunch of land and we have a bunch of new businesses and things like that come into Bel Aire that would really value it.
So no, nothing particular that the chamber has helped with attracting businesses, land sales, anything like that. I will tell you that Chris Madsen, who owns, or his company owns the new spec buildings in Bel Aire Industrial Park over there at 45th, WWAM Investments.
Mm-hmm.
He comes to them and he likes it. He likes that it's there. Now, none of his tenants over there come and I'm not sure that they're members. So, so that as far as the local business community, he's the only one that has came to them and likes the fact that they meet.
I do know that they have hired a gal. Is it Amy? Is her name?
Yes.
Okay, and that one of the tasks that they've assigned to her is to work on growing the membership. And I think that's one of the issues that they've had, that they just haven't had that person to do that, but they have that person now. In your proposal here, they reduce a burden that's currently on the city, and that is to help with the rec center and the community events that the rec center works now, where, as I understand it, on the last Fall Fest, that there were no volunteers for that the city paid the salaries of all the workers who worked at Fall Fest.
Yep.
And this would relieve the city of that responsibility or that burden, because they would take charge of that whole issue.
They would assist with it.
They would assist
and
with
provide
it.
volunteers.
Okay, and provide volunteers. Okay. So it would be a great way of bringing in some volunteers that they're not currently getting, because it's volunteers sometimes are difficult to recruit. But if you have a membership, it's easier to recruit from the membership, right?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
So on that topic specifically, when we've talked about it before, I think I've thought that this was a really good idea to have the chamber help run the community events and try to get the city out of the event planning business. I still really like that idea. What I'm feeling less great about tonight is, as we've talked about it, if we clarify that the purpose of the chamber is for the businesses, which I think it really is, typically it's to support the businesses, to bring business and commerce to the city. That feels like a very different mission than helping with community events. And I worry that if we ask them to focus on that, they'll become the Bel Aire community event organization and not actually be able to do the things that a typical chamber of commerce would want to do. At least that's what I'm sitting here worrying about right now as we've kind of gone through this discussion.
I think they could do both, personally, but I mean, I don't have any control over what they do, right? but I think they could do both. In fact, I think there would be some synergy in that, because you have that membership that could help with things that currently, they're probably not asked, to help with things, and probably would. I mean, I know you have some good connections, and on the fireworks thing, you were able to get a lot of fund support for the fireworks and that kind of thing. And I think if that was the chamber, I'm not saying the chamber takes over that, but if that were the chamber, they could have as much or greater success.
So Ty, just to clarify, the chamber, if we give them this money, said they're going to help what they can with those events, or they're going to take some over? Because help what they can might mean if they don't currently have anyone working for them, they're not going to give the $20,000 back. And I think Gary, the last time he talked about it, kind of made it clear if they didn't have that person, they wouldn't be able to help with any of those. So if they don't have that, we're paying this person to help us, we might as well hire them at the city,
So yeah, that's correct in that we didn't put it on them, the onus on them to plan the events. If you read through it, it does say that the city will determine the events, the recreation center will basically plan the events, and they will provide assistance. And the reason is just because of that. If this person, and you're right, that's what Gary was saying, is if they hire a person and they stay the whole year, then they've got someone that could plan the events. But if that person leaves, then we have no one to plan the events. Mm-hmm. And so that's why this reads that the rec will basically do it, and they will assist with volunteers.
And if they haven't been able to provide volunteers in the past, and some of those people are duplicates, Gary volunteers, he's on both. Of course, he's there. And I would guess there might even be some other duplicates that are already there volunteering. I mean, we're spending $20,000 for volunteers at events. I'd like some evidence that we're getting more than some volunteers at events for $20,000, because I'm guessing we spend less than $20,000 on event volunteers a year now, like significantly less.
How much is our annual membership fee in the chamber?
That's something they've talked about, that they need to raise the dues. They bring in around $2,500, $2,700 in dues.
So how much does Bel Aire pay to be a member?
And I don't remember. I think it's 300, something like that.
So it's negligible.
Yeah, it's inexpensive, and they've talked about they need to raise those.
Okay.
I think talked with Gary here last meeting, and he said individual membership dues is $25 a year.
Okay. Yeah, they definitely need to increase their membership fees or disband. I don't mind giving them money as a jump start, but I don't want to do it on an annual basis. I don't even want to reevaluate it in 2023 if it doesn't work. That's too bad. If it does work, they ought to be off and running. It's kind of how I feel about this.
I feel like we've been doing that for the last 2 years. We gave them 10,000, and all it did for us was they asked for 10,000 more.
I think they gave that back.
2 or 3 years ago, wasn't it? It wasn't last
How many
year.
times have we given them 10,000?
I think we put it in the budget 2 years ago, and then they didn't take it.
Okay. So we did it 1 year.
Just
2020.
120.
How
For
much is it?
10,000?
22? So half of this.
And that maybe isn't a fair year to evaluate against because of COVID.
Right.
I know COVID is a common excuse for a lot of things, but the Bel Aire Chamber of Commerce is largely based on events, and that is one thing that was pretty much shut down. So I also don't know that 1 year of funding will be sufficient to kind of build and or revitalize an organization that's self-sustaining and sufficient. And so if that's our expectation, I'm not sure that we're setting them up for success.
Well, this proposal is to reevaluate the grant for 2023 budget. So we would have some time, not a lot, because the budget has to be done by August. But it would give them some time to see what they could accomplish.
And how long have they existed?
I think they were created in 2008, 2009.
In general, I think the city should, try to help provide resources and sometimes money, or if you let people use facilities and whatnot. I just get worried about the government just kind of funding all these other ancillary things. Is it our job to fund the chamber? I think that the chambers were started by businesses coming together to do networking and whatnot, and I'm not sure that the government needs to get involved. Handing out money to so many organizations. If there's a clear, I don't know. I'm just worried that we're just going to put $20 in the budget and we're going to forget about it and do it every single year, and then debating whether we're going to spend $20,000 on Aurora Park's dust issue, which is probably a bigger deal than whatever the chamber's been able to do the last 15 years.
I don't have a clear sense of direction here. I don't know that we know what we want to do with this.
Well, technically, we can't decide anything tonight anyway.
No, we can't.
So,
But this is direction for the staff as to what to pursue.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
when you talked with the chamber, Ty, what were their thoughts on their probability of success in this model? Were they optimistic and excited about the opportunity and feeling good about what could be done here with a great vision for success in the future and a need for less funding or something less than that? What's your read on their vision for the organization and their belief that they're going to get there?
They feel like they have an uphill battle. And one reason is staffing. they're just hiring a part-time person, and can they get a good quality person for part-time that can do the things they want? Can they increase dues? Again, we talk about the value of that, not been able to meet enough with COVID. Even if they increase the dues to, if they double their membership and they bring in 2,500, maybe they bring in 10,000. Is that still enough? And can they raise money, do fundraising with events of their own events to raise additional money to get to the 20,000? So I think they look at all of those things and they feel like, it's not going to be easy, but if they got the right person, they could do it.
Are there other chambers we're competing with besides Wichita?
So
I know you said it's the area, but what about Park City,
Yeah.
Keachai, Andover?
Right. So, and that's a struggle. And then there's been discussion about that. Wichita, obviously Wichita is the big one. What they see is that they have a great membership, several thousand members, but 10% show up to events. So, but if you have 1,000 members and 10%, that's 100 people. Well, if you've got 20 members and 10%, that's 2 people showing. So, that's a struggle. Park City does have they have a pretty vibrant chamber. They have 50 to 60 members, but their director is someone that's retired that volunteers. And he doesn't do anything else. He's taken that on as his mission, as his job. So they do pretty well, but they don't have to pay anybody because he does that. Park City has struggled a lot. I think maybe they have one. Or Keachai, yeah. They've had 10 members or something like that. There's been discussion about, like a north one where several join up, but Park City feels like they have a good independent one. They don't see a need to join anybody else when theirs is being successful. I did reach out to the Wichita Chamber and said, well, could Bel Aire contract with you to provide some labor to help keep Bel Aire's going? And they weren't interested in that, and maybe it's because it's competing or something. I don't know, but they just weren't interested. I've reached out to them a couple years and asked that. So
I'm just wondering if we should be considering merging with another one. I know that's the chamber's problem, not mine, but.
Well, the chamber did have a combined mixer here, 3 weeks ago or so. I was out of town. And that was with Valley Center, I believe Park City, Keachai, and Bel Aire was all involved in that. I think if I have the complete list, I don't know. And I do know that Park City did put a ad in the Bel Aire Breeze to get people to come to Park City, bring their businesses to Park City. And that was in not the latest one, but the previous month, Bel Aire Breeze. So they're doing things.
Yeah, so I have kind of expressed I'm not sure there's convincing. I think the only thing that would change my mind, and obviously my opinion is not the only one that matters, is I would need some sort of written out plan from the chamber on how they're going to do stuff for Bel Aire. And if that's for say we're going to get more members. The chamber I was a part of got more members so they could raise more money so they could pay the person to go out and get more members to raise more money to pay the person. I was on the board and was never involved in a single thing that involved bringing a business to the city. So I would need like a plan on how that was going to happen rather than, we'll plan on how to raise more money. Like, raise more money for what? Why are we subsidizing an organization that raises money for what? To give it back to us? I mean, why would that make sense? Why don't we just spend the $20,000 on our events already? So that's what it would take to convince me, because I want to see value outside of the mythical, well, they're helping businesses somewhere. I mean, I'm sure we could have a luncheon here every month for all the Bel Aire businesses if we would like. So that's what it would take to kind of convince me. And I hate to sound so negative about it. I think Gary for sure and other people in the organization are just super wonderful. I applaud Gary. He has worked super hard to do his best to keep this going and make it work. And he and the other people that have even started it should be applauded for the work they tried to do to help the city. I would just need a plan on how this is helping the city rather than say, well, we've always had chambers, you know, so maybe Bel Aire needs one.
Well, how would you feel if I took this to the chamber board and make sure that they were comfortable with this and would sign it? And then maybe invite them to put this on the agenda in January, and then invite them to come. And then maybe they could answer your questions. And then we would know, first of all, that they agree with this because they would sign it. And then they could come answer questions that you may have. And then you could decide at that point, would that be appropriate?
So you're proposing they come back at the January workshop?
No, I'd say just have come to the first meeting in January.
Well, if we're going to have a give and take, answer questions, that sounds more like a workshop than a council meeting.
Well, we could put it on a workshop if you would like additional questions, prior to making a decision. We could do it in the January workshop and then have it on the second meeting.
I think we can go back and forth with questions and have discussion in a meeting. I'd hate to delay it to the workshop.
I don't mind delaying it.
But as I look at this, ultimately, I think the question I have to answer is, why should the taxpayers write a $20,000 check? And I don't feel like Utah can sit here and answer that on behalf of the chamber. And we do need the chamber to be here to kind of speak to that. And I think there are ways that they could answer that question that would convince me that, yep, it's a good idea. And there are ways that they could answer that question that would make me think, maybe this is less of a good idea. But we probably need to hear from them on that. And so if they first need to discuss it and then come and talk with us, that sounds like a great path forward.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll set up a meeting with them, take this to them, see if they're comfortable with it, and if they'd be willing to come to either the first or second meeting in January, kind of explain what your questions have been, and if they could come and bring some answers. And then maybe you'd feel more comfortable about making the decision. Is that okay?
Okay. Any other issues we need to discuss this evening? If not,
Yes, I think you had a whole list of them when we prepped for the workshop.
No, I wasn't really opening the window for that whole list.
Oh, okay.
I just
Don't
wanted to
ask,
make sure
don't
there wasn't
tell.
something that was really urgent on somebody's mind that had to be brought up. So if not, I will close the meeting and dismiss the workshop. And I think maybe a 5-minute break might be appropriate, and then we'll move on to the land bank meeting, and then we can go home.
Yeah.